So in a very simple sense, all we're talking about is we start on what can be called a gross level out here of language, and then we move to a subtle level, and then we move to a still subtler level, and finally we move to the point where the only thing left is the true self. Remember when we talked about the meditation piece, we used the word nirodha. Patanjali in Yoga Sutra says yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. And nirodha was in meditation setting aside everything, and then tadadrastu svarupe vasnam, then the seer rests in its true nature. Here with contemplation we're doing something similar, only we are using our reflective intelligence mind to use the language. So when we say, who am I my body, am I my mind, am I my habit patterns, and all that, we're headed for the same direction. And so we end up with a very quiet inner peace, that silence that we mentioned a moment ago, that has the knowing, the formless knowing that who I am. Now, see, and I have to use words to say it, a formless, wordless knowing that who I am is the one back here behind all of these mental processes. I'm not the one who is seeing the stuff in the people out there. I am the one who is operating outward through intelligence called buddhi, through a me called ego, through a bunch of false identities that are stored in that hard drive called chitta, and that then through the manas or mind are operating out in the external world. But I am the one way back here that's operating outward through those instruments. And we start with that process with contemplation. Again, using narrative with things like, who am I my body, am I my personality? And this is not who I am. I think that this house is mine, but it is not my house. One time some years ago in Florida, we had a satsang, a gathering, and we were all talking about this kind of identity with things. And we all had the theory down. We all understood it and said, oh, this is pretty easy. And then we got together a few weeks later. Well, something happened here in the meantime between those two satsang sessions. It was a hurricane. A hurricane, we're in Florida, hurricanes come through. A hurricane came through, and we got together the second time, and I said to everybody, remember that the last time we were together, we talked about non-attachment and the true self, and that I am not these things that we're involved with? Everybody said, oh, yes, I remember that. I said, I have a question for you. How was that right in the middle of the hurricane, when the winds were blowing at 125 miles an hour, and your house was making creaking noises, and you thought maybe the house was going to get blown away or fall apart? Did you really have that level of insight at that moment? And we all had to acknowledge, no, at that moment, no. It felt like my house is about to blow away, and my body is about to get killed by this hurricane. And so this is how our minds operate. It's not a criticism, nothing wrong with that, but it's being aware that something happens in our life, and of course we react as if I'm a body. You're trying to cross the street, and all of a sudden here comes a car and goes zooming by you very fast, and the driver hits his horn and blasts the horn at you, and you jump back. Why do you jump back? Because you think you're a body. This is not a criticism, but as we then walk on with our walk of wherever we're going, we ponder this and we realize, oh, silly mind. I thought for a moment that I was a body about to get hit by a car. And in some sense it's true, obviously. But in the contemplative sense, what we're doing right then in that moment when the car came speeding by and the horn is honking, then after that, as I'm walking away, talking to myself, or maybe talking with the person I'm walking with, and we realize, oh, I forgot. I forgot that I'm consciousness. I forgot that I'm Atman. And then as I ponder this, I said, but as I was afraid of getting hit by the car because my body, who is me, was about to get crunched, in that moment, who was it that was back behind this false identity? And suddenly I get a flash of intuition. I just realize, well, that was consciousness. There was consciousness operating outward through avidya or ignorance and believing myself to be a body and believing that car and that driver to be another person out there who's about to hit me with the car. And so all of these are natural processes. And there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with jumping out of the way of a speeding car. It's probably a good thing. Keeps the body alive. These bodies are very convenient to have. It's the, so to speak, it's the temple in which we do our meditation and in which we do the contemplation. So we need these bodies and we need to have them alive. We need them to not be run over by cars and we need them to not be killed in hurricanes. So we do the reasonable things to keep safety going. One of the primitive urges, there's primitive urges that yogis talk about, and these are contemplated upon, are the primitive needs or urges for food, sleep, sex, and self-preservation. They relate to, in chakras, when we jump over to the energy systems that come out of Tantra, they relate to the lower chakras, the identities of me, of food and sleep and sex and self-preservation. The primary one of those being self-preservation. So it's not simply that I'm going to say, no, I'm divine, I'm spiritual, I'm pure consciousness, so I don't need to do any more. I'm finished with self-preservation. I don't do that anymore. And no, that's not what it's about. It's we take reasonable care to have reasonable safety in our lives. It's like parents teach children, when you're going to cross the street, look both ways for the cars before you cross the street. So when we're crossing that street and the car almost hit us, what happened? We may realize later, oh, I wasn't paying attention. I was daydreaming about philosophy or getting to where I was walking, and I forgot I wasn't paying attention. So we do live this simple principle of self-preservation wisely. We're using the intelligence of buddhi, of manas, citta, ahamkara, and buddhi. We're using the intelligence, the wisdom of buddhi that knows, decides, judges, and discriminates or discerns. But it's the knowing part. It's the intelligence itself.